Tammy's shocking birthday bombshell leaves Amy speechless. 1,000-pound sisters. The June sun hung low over the Kentucky hills, casting long shadows across the familiar driveway of Tammy Slaton's home. It was her birthday week, a stretch of days that, in years past, had been marked by hospital visits, arguments over food, and the heavy silence of unspoken fears. But this year felt different. This year, Tammy had been out of rehab for several months. She'd lost a significant amount of weight. She was walking more, not just scooting from bed to chair, but actually using a rolling walker to move around the house. Her voice, still raspy from the trach tube she'd worn for so long, had grown stronger. Amy, her younger sister, arrived with grocery bags full of diet-friendly snacks and a store-bought cake she'd decorated herself with sugar-free frosting. Amy was a mother now, juggling 2 boys under 3, but she'd made time for Tammy. She always did. "Tammy, I'm here," Amy called out, kicking the door shut behind her. From the living room, Tammy's voice drifted back. "About time. Thought you forgot my birthday." Amy rolled her eyes, setting the cake on the kitchen counter. "I would never. You know that." What Amy didn't know, what no one in the family knew, was that Tammy had been sitting on a secret for 3 weeks. 3 long, sleepless weeks of turning it over in her mind, of whispering it to her pillow at night, of almost telling her best friend on the phone before hanging up at the last second. This wasn't a small secret. This was the kind of secret that, once spoken, could rearrange every relationship in her life. Tammy wheeled herself into the kitchen, not in her old, oversized wheelchair, but a smaller, lighter one she could now push with her own arms for short distances. Her face, still round but with emerging bone structure, held a strange expression. Not sadness. Not anger. Something closer to determination, mixed with terror. Amy noticed immediately. "You okay? You look like you're about to take a test you didn't study for." Tammy almost laughed. "Something like that." The family gathers. By mid-afternoon, the small house had filled with familiar faces. Chris, the older brother who had become the family's unofficial spokesperson, arrived with his wife, Brittany. Amanda, the fierce sister who never held back, came in wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." Misty, the quietest of the siblings, slipped in with a bowl of coleslaw and a warm hug for Tammy. The living room was cramped but cozy. Balloons, generic happy birthday ones from the dollar store, bobbed against the ceiling. A banner that read "Another Year Wiser" hung crookedly above the TV. Everyone was making small talk. Amy was chasing her toddler, who had discovered the joy of unspooling an entire roll of toilet paper. Chris was grilling chicken on the back porch. Amanda was pouring diet sodas. Tammy sat in her wheelchair, oddly still. Normally, she'd be the loudest in the room, cracking jokes about her size, making sarcastic comments about Amy's parenting, or demanding to know when the food would be ready. But today, she just watched. She watched Amy laugh. She watched Chris flip chicken. She watched the afternoon light shift across the carpet. And she thought, this is the last normal moment. After today, everything changes. The cake and the calm. Finally, it was cake time. Amy lit the single for a candle on top of the sheet cake. Tammy was turning 36, but the store had run out of 3 and 6 candles, so Amy had made a joke of it. "You're forever 4 in my heart," Amy had said, giggling. The family gathered around, phone cameras raised. Chris started the birthday song, his deep voice leading the way. Amanda harmonized loudly, slightly off-key. Misty mouthed the words. Amy's toddler clapped with frosting-covered hands. Tammy looked at each face in turn. Chris, the rock. Amanda, the protector. Misty, the peacekeeper. Amy, the sister who had dragged her across state lines to see weight loss surgeons, who had changed her adult diapers in hotels, who had cried with her in emergency rooms at 2 a.m. When the song ended, everyone cheered. "Make a wish," Amy shouted. Tammy stared at the candle flame for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she leaned forward and blew it out. "What did you wish for?" Amanda asked, already reaching for the knife to cut the cake. Tammy didn't answer. Instead, she held up one hand, palm out like a traffic cop stopping traffic. "Wait." Before we eat, I need to say something. The room went quiet. Even Amy's toddler paused, sensing the shift in energy. You're scaring me, Amy said, her smile faltering. Tammy took a breath, the kind of breath a person takes before jumping off a high dive. I'm engaged. Speechless. For a full 5 seconds, no one spoke. Amanda's hand, mid-reach for the cake knife, froze in the air. Chris's jaw unhinged slightly, then clicked shut. Misty put her coleslaw bowl down like it had suddenly become too heavy. But Amy's face went through a series of expressions that could not be named in sequence. Confusion first, then disbelief, then a kind of blank, empty flatness, as if her brain had simply refused to process the input. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Tammy had prepared for many reactions. She had prepared for screaming. She had prepared for tears. She had prepared for accusations. She had even prepared for someone to laugh, thinking it was a joke. But she had not prepared for Amy to look at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Amy, Tammy said, her voice smaller now. You hear me? Amy blinked. Once. Twice. Then, in a whisper that barely escaped her lips. What did you say? I said I'm engaged. Tammy repeated, more firmly this time. I'm getting married. The silence that followed was so deep, so complete, that the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fill the entire house. The backstory unfolds. Here is what the family did not know. 3 months earlier, Tammy had started texting with a man she'd met online through a weight loss support group. His name was Steve. He lived in Ohio, about 4 hours away. He was also a large man, not as large as Tammy had been at her heaviest, but still over 350 pounds. He had lost a significant amount of weight through the same bariatric program Tammy was in. They had bonded over shared struggles, the shame of being stared at in public, the difficulty of finding clothes that fit, the fear of dying young. What started as a casual exchange of memes and "how was your day?" texts had turned into nightly phone calls, then video calls, then a weekend visit, Tammy's first real date in years. Steve had driven down to Kentucky. He had met Tammy at a neutral location, a Cracker Barrel just off the interstate. They had talked for 4 hours over diet lemonade. He had made her laugh. He had not once looked at her plate or asked what she was eating. He had looked at her face, her eyes, her hands, like she was someone worth seeing. On that second date, Steve had gotten down on one knee, a struggle, given his own mobility issues, and pulled out a simple silver ring. No diamond, just a thin band with a tiny heart engraved inside. He had said, I know we haven't known each other long, but I also know I don't want to wait. Will you marry me? Tammy had said yes before he finished the question. She had told no one. Not her case manager. Not her therapist. Not her best friend. And certainly not her sisters. She had worn the ring on a chain around her neck, hidden under her shirt, for 3 weeks. Every night, she took it off and held it in her palm, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision she'd ever made. The explosion. Back in the living room, the silence finally broke, not with words, but with a sound. A sharp, choked gasp from Amy. Then came the flood. No, Amy said, shaking her head. No, no, no. You are not engaged. You cannot be engaged. To who? To some man online? Tammy, have you lost your mind? Amy. No. Don't Amy me. Do you remember what happened the last time you trusted a man online? Do you remember Philip? Do you remember how he sold stories about you to the tabloids? Do you remember how he made you cry for weeks? Tammy's face hardened. This is different. How is it different? Amy was standing now, her hands shaking. How, Tammy? Tell me one way this is different. Because Steve has never asked me for money. He's never asked for nudes. He's never asked to meet in secret. He just likes me. For me. Amanda stepped in, her voice lower but no less sharp. How long have you even known him? 3 months. 3 months. Chris said, finally finding his voice from the doorway. Tammy, you don't marry someone after 3 months. That's not marriage. That's an impulse. You married Brittany after 6 months. Tammy shot back. That's different. We were in our 30s. We had jobs. We had our own places. Chris stopped himself, but the unspoken words hung in the air. You're still fragile. You're still recovering. You're still not fully independent. Tammy heard them anyway. Amy's silent scream. While the others argued, Amy had retreated to the kitchen. She stood at the counter, staring at the uncut cake, the candle now extinguished and slightly melted at the base. Her hands were pressed flat against the countertop, knuckles white. She wasn't crying. That was the strange thing. Amy was a crier. She cried at commercials, at sunsets, at her own children's sneezes. But now, her eyes were dry and wide, like a deer caught in headlights. Her mind was racing through a highlight reel of the past decade, the countless times she had put her own life on hold to take care of Tammy. The hospital stays where she slept on plastic-covered chairs. The rehab visits where Tammy had screamed at her to leave, then begged her to stay. The surgeries. The setbacks. The hope that had been dashed so many times that Amy had stopped hoping and just started doing. And now this. A secret engagement. A man none of them had ever met. A ring hidden like a shameful thing. Amy's internal monologue, unspoken but screaming. I gave up years of my life for you. I changed your bandages. I wiped your face when you couldn't lift your arms. I held your hand while you cried about dying alone. And now you're telling me you found someone and you didn't even tell me? You let me walk in here with a stupid sugar-free cake while you were wearing a secret engagement ring around your neck? What kind of sister does that? What kind of sister am I that you didn't trust me with this? But she didn't say any of that. She just stood there, silent and trembling. Tammy's defense. Tammy wheeled herself into the kitchen doorway. She could see Amy's back, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers were gripping the counter like it was the only thing holding her upright. Amy, Tammy said quietly. Look at me. Amy didn't turn around. Please. Slowly, Amy turned. Her face was a mask of hurt, not anger. That was worse. Tammy could handle anger. Anger was just fear with a louder voice. But hurt was quiet. Hurt was the thing that took years to heal. I wasn't trying to keep it from you, Tammy said. I was trying to protect you. Amy laughed, a short, hollow sound with no joy in it. Protect me? From what? Happiness? From disappointment, Tammy said. In case it falls apart. In case he's not who I think he is. In case I'm wrong. Again. Amy's eyes finally filled with tears. Tammy, I have watched you be wrong so many times. I have picked up the pieces so many times. That doesn't mean I want to be kept in the dark. That's not protection. That's punishment. Tammy's own voice cracked. I know. I'm sorry. For a moment, neither sister moved. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere in the living room, one of the children laughed. Then Amy walked over, knelt down in front of Tammy's wheelchair, and took her sister's hands. Tell me about him, Amy said. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out. The revelation within the revelation. So Tammy talked. She talked for 45 minutes while the rest of the family drifted back in, one by one, to listen. She told them about the support group. The first message. The phone calls that lasted until 3 a.m. The way Steve pronounced her name. Tammin. Soft, like it was something precious. She showed them the ring on its chain. Amanda examined it, turning it over in her calloused fingers. It's small, she said, not unkindly. That's the point, Tammy said. He said he didn't want to show off. He just wanted to make a promise. Chris asked the practical questions. Does he have a job? Where does he live? Is he divorced? Does he have kids? Tammy answered each one. He works in warehouse logistics. He rents a small house in Columbus. He was married once, 10 years ago, no kids. He's 41 years old. Then came the question no one had thought to ask, the question that would change everything again. Misty, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Tammy, she said softly. When is the wedding? Tammy looked down at her hands, then up at her sisters, then at Chris, then back at Amy, whose eyes were still red but now curious. That's the other thing, Tammy said. Amy's breath caught. There's another thing? Tammy nodded. We're not waiting. We're getting married next month. In Ohio. At the courthouse. And then we're moving in together. The silence that followed was different from before. Before, the silence had been shock. Now, it was something closer to awe, the kind of quiet that happens when a person realizes they've been watching a story unfold and missed the turning point. Amy looked at her sister, really looked at her. Tammy's cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. Her hands, resting in her lap, were still. For the first time in years, Amy saw not the sister she had to take care of, but the sister she used to play dolls with, the sister who once swore she'd become a singer, the sister who had almost died so many times that Amy had started planning a funeral in her head. And now that sister was talking about a future. A real future. A husband. A home. A life that didn't revolve around doctor's appointments and weigh-ins and arguments about portion sizes. Amy opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then, for the second time that day, she said nothing. But this time, the silence wasn't shock or hurt. It was surrender. The aftermath. The cake was eaten. The chicken got cold. The balloons slowly lost their float. And by the time the sun set over the Kentucky hills, the family had split into two camps. Amanda and Misty were cautiously optimistic. They wanted to meet Steve, to see the house in Ohio, to run a background check, Amanda's suggestion. Chris was skeptical but supportive, in the way that older brothers are, ready to step in if things went wrong, but willing to let Tammy make her own mistakes. Amy was quiet. She helped clean up, washed the dishes, packed the leftover cake into Tupperware. She kissed Tammy on the forehead before she left, but she didn't say congratulations. She didn't say, I'm happy for you. She just said, I love you. Call me tomorrow. In the car, driving home with her sleeping toddler in the back seat, Amy finally let herself cry. Not because she was sad, not because she was angry, but because she realized, all at once, that Tammy had just done something Amy herself had never been brave enough to do. She had chosen happiness without asking for permission. Amy had spent her whole life seeking approval from her mother, from her ex-husband, from the internet, from the scale. Tammy, for all her flaws, had just thrown approval to the wind. She had found a man who didn't care about her past or her weight or her TV fame. And she was marrying him. That night, Amy texted Tammy a single line. I'm not speechless anymore. I'm proud of you. Tammy replied with a heart emoji and a photo of the silver ring now on her finger, no longer hidden. The fans react. When the episode finally aired 4 months later, the internet exploded. Clips of Amy's frozen face went viral. Memes were made. Hot takes were written. Some fans accused Tammy of rushing into a bad situation. Others praised her for grabbing happiness with both hands. A small but vocal group insisted the entire engagement was staged for ratings. But the truth, as always, was messier than any single narrative. The wedding did happen, a quiet ceremony in Columbus, attended only by Steve's mother and a videographer Tammy hired to capture the moment. The sisters watched the video together, huddled on Amy's couch, eating popcorn. When the screen showed Tammy saying, I do, Amy turned to her sister and said, You know, I really thought you were joking when you said it at your birthday. Tammy grinned. That's why I love you, Amy. You always think I'm joking. And I always prove you wrong. They laughed. They cried. They finished the popcorn. And somewhere in Ohio, Steve, now legally Tammy's husband, was painting the spare bedroom yellow because Tammy had always wanted a yellow room. What speechless really means. Months later, in a podcast interview, Amy was asked about that moment, the birthday bombshell, the silence that followed, the shock that rippled through the family. Amy thought for a long time before answering. Then she said this. You know, people think speechless means you don't have anything to say. But that's not it. Being speechless means you have too much to say. Your brain is moving so fast that your mouth can't catch up. When Tammy told me she was engaged, I wasn't empty. I was overflowing. I was scared and happy and angry and hopeful all at once. And there's no script for that. There's no line you can say. You just sit there and feel it. And that's what I did.
She paused.
And then, after a while, you find the words. And you say them. And that's when the real story starts.